I'm Alan Bresnik, Light Reading Cable Video Practice Leader. I'm here with Jeff Baumgartner, Senior Editor at Light Reading, covering cable, video, broadband, and everything else. We're going to talk about Tuesday's Cable Next Gen Business Services Conference, which we did digitally for the first time, even though it's our 14th year of doing this conference. Lots of takeaways from the conference, Jeff. Where should we start?
Well, I thought you had a pretty good snapshot at the beginning, just kind of saying where the market is, right? So generally, you said, okay, well, cable business services in general is kind of, the rate of growth is slow just because the number is a lot bigger. So naturally, even though you're growing, the rate of growth is going to slow. But in 2020, obviously, with the pandemic, that's created some issues for all service providers providing business services. So, I mean, what was the story? You kind of talked about some numbers, but generally, what's going on the cable side?
Okay, yeah, there were a lot of numbers yesterday. I started off by showing some MSO numbers through the second quarter, and it's clear that in the second quarter, cable operators pretty much their business services revenues either came in flat or a little bit up or a little bit down from the first quarter, still up probably from a year ago, but the rate of growth is definitely slow to come to almost a standstill once the pandemic hit in March. So the big question is what happens after Q2. I was projecting that their numbers will pretty much stay the same in the third quarter and the fourth quarter. They won't go up, they won't go down. But then we heard a lot of other numbers throughout the day from a couple analysts, a couple of cable operators. So we had a lot of numbers to play around with yesterday. Bob Victor from Comcast presented some numbers showing that, or some statements from some of the other cable operators showing that Q3 is actually going to come in higher than originally expected, higher than feared, that there actually will be some growth for the big operators in Q3. Before the projections had been that they would be flat or that they might even see revenues go down in Q3.
What I thought was interesting with Bob's talk too was, okay, despite kind of the challenges faced just by the general segment, but it kind of opened up some opportunities to develop and kind of accelerate the development of some new initiatives, some new products.
Right.
And I thought he talked a little bit about like an SD-WAN product kind of tailored for the home, because as people work from home and the home kind of becomes a node on the corporate network, there's a need for it. So it sounds like they've really ramped that up a little bit.
Yeah, it sounds like they're all starting to work on work from home products. I mean, you've reported on Comcast and Cox both came out with remote work from home products in the past few months. Altice is working on one. It sounds like Spectrum is working on one as well. So I think it's going to become the norm, that it's going to become a standard practice for all these operators to have remote work from home products and to bring their residential networks up to at least higher quality, if not all the way up to where enterprise networks are.
Yeah, it seems like even if things as they do open up eventually, kind of this new normal that everyone likes to talk about is going to be more of a hybrid environment. Maybe not 100% in the office, not 100% at home, but definitely, eventually moving toward kind of a mix. So for the that you are at home, and suddenly, they're going to need to be able to support that environment from a longer term perspective, whether you're, a cable operator or the business.
Right. Yeah, we kept hearing the word hybrid a lot yesterday, especially when we asked people about what they think is going to be the new normal a year from now. And they all said that it's not going to go back to the way it was. It won't be the way it is now, but it will be some kind of hybrid, some kind of mix of some people back in the office at least part of the time, and a lot of people still working at home. We heard the word hybrid a lot yesterday in terms of what the new normal will be. The other word we heard a lot yesterday was resiliency, that the business market has been more resilient than a lot of people feared, a lot of people expected, that not as many businesses have gone out of business as originally projected. Even small businesses are hanging in there, hanging on, partly because of the federal government stimulus package and partly just a sheer grit at this point, I think.
Right. Yeah, I think I was listening to Matt Davis, and he did bring up at least the SMB segment kind of being maybe a little more resilient than expected. But then he also talked about this survey with like an independent. I think it was the National Federation of Independent Business, and
Right.
poll, and said like 20% of them still indicated that they're like in real trouble. So they've been coping well, but he said, hey, this is going to be a rocky road for a lot of these. Now, how about on the enterprise side? What was the perspective on that? I think they kind of weathered it a little bit better.
Yeah, they used the word of resilience again there too. Brian Washburn, who's an Omdia analyst, was talking about that the enterprise segment seems to have held up okay, and just moved to some more to remote working from home products, services. We talked to Satya Parimi about that, and he said that, of course, he said the Spectrum Enterprise is doing okay that way as well, that they're holding up with their enterprise customers, that they're moving a lot more quickly than they were before to managed services. So they plan to roll out a bunch of new managed services later this year and into 2021.
Right. And kind of going back to what Brian said, I mean, I think in addition to resilience, he kind of brought up the idea that there's a lot of what's going on is kind of been fairly chaotic in terms of how everyone's responding, particularly on the enterprise side. And I think he was talking about some research, some post-COVID survey work anyway, where like half of the companies have been accelerating some new products and in some of their digital priorities. A smaller percentage were not doing anything new, and then others were kind of reprioritizing to kind of figure out the direction they need to go and whether to delay or cancel projects. So a lot of there's no uniform situation here, and I think it reflects that we're talking about this chaotic situation is also applied by the vertical. One vertical, is really getting hammered more than others that are being supported by service providers that are delivering enterprise class services. So, a lot of moving parts. Yeah, there's like no, one common theme, across the board. It just feels like, the way that the pandemic is impacting businesses different, just on a case by case basis.
Yeah, there's definitely no consensus. Like, I mean, the hospitality industry has really gotten slammed. The hotels, restaurants, airlines, while other industries have been able to hold up better because they're not as dependent on people traveling, on people going out to eat or that sort of thing.
Right.
So definitely no consensus there. It really depends on the industry, on the segment, and sometimes it depends on the region. Some regions of the country are doing better than other regions of the country. In fact, one of our speakers who didn't show, unfortunately, Christy Salmon from MediaCom, would have stressed that how the MediaCom is seeing a lot different results in Iowa, for instance, than they're seeing in, say, upstate New York. And I think Altice went on a little bit about that, how they're seeing a lot different results in the New York metro area than they're seeing in, say, parts of Texas where they have cable system. So there's no one, as you said, there's no one uniform result that's happening right now. I guess one of the big unknowns going forward is whether there's another federal stimulus package coming up, and when that, if it happens, and if it does happen, when it'll happen. Because a lot of businesses are just kind of hanging on, waiting for some new aid to be funneled in. And if that aid doesn't come in the next few months, we could see a real change in the business market. And some of the analysts were hinting at that. They were trying to be hopeful about it, but they were hinting that, if that package doesn't come through, this market could really get shaken up.
Right. So you just kept on that. I know you've been trying to think about your forecast. So it sounds like there's a little bit of a wait and see, right? Because you're still waiting for third quarter. We're waiting for, what's going to happen on the stimulus package. So
Right.
Any additional stimulus. So until that happens, I mean, you're kind of in a kind of a holding pattern, I guess.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, there's some hints about the third quarter. Bob Victor had a couple of hints about it. Greg Williams, who was another keynote speaker from Cowen and Company, he gave the Wall Street perspective in the afternoon. And he talked about how what he's seeing is that the Q3 numbers are going to be better. And so he's hopeful for that the whole second half of the year is going to be better. And he also pointed to the fact that residential broadband is doing really well for cable operators right now, and how that will have spillover effects into other areas and sort of help sustain business services, even if business services doesn't get back to the same level of growth that it was prior to this year.
Okay. And like any topic or theme or category, it seems like, you can't escape 5G being discussed, right? And when I caught one of the panels yesterday, I think both Brian Washburn and Matt Davis talked a little bit about what the role of 5G for cable operators. And I think Brian said, the focus could be on, 5G really having a real role in supplementing wired broadband, and maybe in some cases replacing. And Matt Davis said, hey, this could really open up a new opportunity for like an internet backup. He kind of said, hey, it's like selling insurance, right? If you need, if you're going to be working from home and you absolutely, it's critical, you have some sort of backup. If the wired network goes down, it's nice to have 5G. Now I imagine even 4G, I mean, any sort of, cellular backup might be, more important today than it was 8 months ago.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there seems to be there's a lot of talk about 5G and the potential for business services. We did a whole panel on that at the big 5G event a couple of weeks ago with Brian and Matt were both on that one as well. And they were talking about how they could see 5G being used. Actually, probably one of the first use cases is for business services, at least for cable operators, and private networks, private business networks, private corporate campuses and stuff like that. So, yeah, there's a lot of talk about that. It's going to be interesting to see how those use cases develop and whether there's actually money to be made that way.
Okay, yeah, covered a lot of ground on Tuesday for business services. Day two coming up on Thursday. So
right.
I know you've been kind of teasing things, but anything else I should be ready to take notes on?
Sure, definitely. The first panel will be on upgrading the cable architecture. So we're going to hear about a wide range of things. We'll hear about DOCSIS 4.0. We'll hear about the new plans for flexible MAC architecture that you wrote about, because Curtis Niddle from Cable Labs will be on the panel. We'll hear a lot about mid splits and high splits and what operators like Cox and Shaw are planning on that. And we'll talk about network virtualization. We'll talk about 5G. We'll talk about automation. Just the wide gamut of things that cable operators are working on right now, and how the pandemic has affected that, what the pandemic has accelerated and what the pandemic has slowed down in terms of upgrade projects. Okay, well, I'll get my note-taking fingers ready to go and for Thursday. And I hope everybody will be joining us and tune in on Thursday. So thanks, Alan, for walking us through kind of a review of Tuesday in business services. We'll look forward to the next chapter on Thursday. Okay, thanks, Jeff. We'll keep you busy. All right. All right.